Generally, corporate officers and directors owe the corporation they serve a fiduciary duty of loyalty to act in the corporation's best interests and not in their own self-interests. In the 1964 case State on the Relation of Hayes Oyster Company versus Keypoint Oyster Company, the Washington Supreme Court considered whether a corporate officer and director breached this duty by failing to disclose his personal interest in a corporate transaction. Coast Oyster Company was a publicly held Washington corporation that owned oyster beds. Hayes Oyster Company was a close corporation in Oregon engaged in the same business. Verne Hayes was Coast's chief executive officer, a director, and a shareholder. Verne was also a co-owner of Hayes Oyster, along with his brother Sam. In October of 1958, Coast and Verne entered into an employment contract whereby Verne was to act as president and manager of Coast. The agreement included a non-compete provision in which Verne agreed to refrain from taking part in any business that would be in competition with the business of Coast, except for his dealings with Hayes Oyster. In the spring of 1960, Coast began experiencing financial difficulties and sought to sell some of its oyster beds to a longtime employee, Joseph Engman. Engman needed money to buy the beds and asked Verne for help. Verne said that his employment contract with Coast could forbid helping Engman out, but advised that Hayes Oyster could provide money. In August of 1960, Coast's board voted to approve the sale of the beds to Engman's corporation, Keypoint Oyster Company, for $250,000. A shareholder meeting was held where a majority of Coast's shareholders voted to approve the contract. Following approval, Engman gave shares of Keypoint to Verne with a separate blank assignment that was later filled out to Hayes Oyster as assignee. But Verne never disclosed his or Hayes Oyster's involvement with Keypoint to Coast's directors, officers, or shareholders. Further, after entering into the deal, Verne had Coast make a payment that was Keypoint's obligation under the sales contract. Subsequently, in May of 1961, Verne was terminated from his position at Coast. Verne and Sam then demanded that Engman transfer the shares of Keypoint to Hayes Oyster, which Engman refused to do. Hayes Oyster petitioned the state superior court for a writ of mandamus, or a legal directive, to compel the transfer. A trial was held to determine who was entitled to ownership of the shares. Following trial, the court found for Hayes Oyster, concluding that Verne didn't breach any fiduciary duty to Coast. Coast appealed to the Washington Supreme Court.